Hello, I'm Becky Vivi. I'm the Bureau Chief with Chalkbeat Chicago. Welcome to our inaugural School Board Candidate Forums. These are conversations with the people running in Chicago's historic first school board elections. Welcome to anyone tuning in live at our YouTube channel. If you have questions for the candidates, please type them into the comments and we'll do our best to get to them. We're very happy to welcome one of the candidates of District 3 today, Carlos Rivas. His opponent couldn't make it today, but we will be speaking with him tomorrow morning. Carlos is the Director of Public Affairs at the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, also known as COPA. He's a former CPS teacher, former counselor at UIC College Prep. He's a CPS graduate of his neighborhood elementary school, Lowell, and Northside College Prep, a selective enrollment high school. Rivas also serves as a transitional foster parent. Welcome and thank you so much for being here, Carlos.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So we're starting off all of these conversations with a little icebreaker, and I'd love for you to tell me, what was your favorite and least favorite subject growing up in school?
My favorite subject, actually, which is very interesting because I didn't follow this passion later on, but my favorite subject I remember in 6th grade being science. And we had this one science project where we actually went to go test the water at the lagoon in Humboldt Park, which was super fascinating to me. And my least favorite subject, not that it was my least favorite, but at least one that I struggled with a bit, and I definitely glad that I had extra supports in school to help me with it, was math. But that's, I think, understandable for those of us who have had to do calculus.
Exactly. We have a lot of folks with a little bit of least favorite math, but that's great. And wow, the lagoon, what an experiment.
Yeah,
What
definitely.
do you remember about what you learned from the water?
So this was on the lagoon side, not the beach side.
Okay.
And so I just remember it being like, this is probably not the cleanest water that is out there. So
yeah. Oh, wow. That's amazing. All right. Well, we're going to jump right into some of the most up-to-date current events news in CPS right now. Obviously, there has been a lot of news with the resignation of the previous board and an appointment of new board members who may or may not be your colleagues come January. But we have a couple of yes or no questions, and I'm going to just start with a yes or no, and then you'll have 30 seconds to kind of explain why you answered the way you did. So yes or no, would you keep Pedro Martinez in the role of CPS CEO?
yes.
Do you, yes or no, support taking out a high-interest loan to cover operating costs in Chicago public schools?
No.
Okay, and can you explain why you answered the way that you did?
So first off, with keeping our CEO, I think that we need stability in our school system. We've had so many CEOs over the past decade. Our school system absolutely needs stability at a time when we are facing these structural deficits in terms of funding. And I believe CEO Martinez inherited a system that needs his leadership, and I want to be able to see him through his full contract.
Mm-hmm. And how about the loan?
And for the loan, we don't want to bankrupt future generations. If we can't pay for it today, what is going to make that deficit go away next year and the following year? We're going to keep having the same issue unless we change the way we're looking at how we're funding our school system.
Got it. Now, I'm going to get into the question of CPS leadership a little bit more, because whether or not Pedro Martinez stays through the end of his contract, this new board will likely be tasked with hiring a new CEO. The board's one of their key responsibilities is to hire and evaluate and potentially let go of a CPS CEO. What qualities or experience would you like to see a CPS CEO have, whether that's Pedro Martinez or anyone in the future, should you be elected?
Yeah, I think that our CPS CEO needs to have experience, and also someone, I believe, should be someone who's really community focused. We're a city of neighborhoods, 77 distinct community areas. The needs in every neighborhood are different, so I want to be able to see a CEO that really is thinking about authentic community engagement. Right now, we have a lot of performative community engagement, and I think as a board, we can work on building more authentic community engagement. And I want a CEO that's going to prioritize bringing our families along in decisions.
You mentioned experience right away. What kind of experience? Do you mean education experience? Do you believe this person should have been an educator?
So I do believe that being an educator could be a great experience for them to have, obviously to understand the needs of our classrooms and our teachers and the difficulties that they face. I also believe, as Pedro Martinez does, have experience being a superintendent in other school districts. I think that's valuable. We're, the fourth largest school district in the nation. It's a really big task to be able to be the superintendent of our schools, really. That title, CEO versus superintendent. He is a superintendent of schools. And so we want to make sure that I think it would be valuable to have someone who has that experience running a large school district as Pedro Martinez does.
Okay. Let's get into budget, because another one of the school board's big responsibilities is approving a budget every single year. Obviously, district leadership puts together that budget. You guys get to vote on it. We'll start with a yes or no. Do you think that the state of Illinois should provide CPS additional funding in addition to what it currently does?
Yes.
Okay. Let's elaborate on that. So how would you go about working with state elected officials and other elected officials to get additional state funding to CPS?
So I think that government officials at every single level need to work together. Obviously, our schools are incredibly important to our communities. Our schools are educating our future. And so we need to make sure that at every single level of government, we're working to provide for our schools. We already see that at the aldermanic level with older people who are providing ward menu money to be able to build playgrounds and things like that at schools. We need to be able to then work together with our state counterparts to be able to advocate for more funding for CPS. There are a lot of structural differences between the way CPS is funded and managed compared to districts across the state of Illinois. So we want to make sure that we're able to bring some more equity in terms of funding for the district. And so the state's own funding formula calls for additional funding. It hasn't been allocated yet, and I think that we can work together with our state legislature to be able to bring that money in.
Mm-hmm. So I also want to talk a little bit about whether or not there's additional state funding that gets ramped up. Chicago Public Schools, in its most recent budget, put out a 5-year projection of sort of its fiscal picture, if you will. And in that picture, before any added costs related to a new teacher's contract or a principal's contract, it projected $500 million deficits for the next 5 years. So one of your first tasks, if you're elected, will be to balance that budget next summer. How do you think about balancing the budget and closing that $500 million structural gap every year? How do you think about those things?
Yeah, that's one of the main reasons why we can't take out a payday loan today to pay for the structural deficit that we have. I think that it's incredibly important that we work with our state counterparts and really all groups to be able to come together to figure out what is it that we can do to ensure that our schools are adequately funded at our level, and ensure that we're bringing in the resources necessary. So that is going to take a lot of work and a lot of people coming together. It's not going to be just a solution of the board. It needs to be something that we're working with our state counterparts, city, to be able to ensure that either there are going to be structural changes in terms of pension payments and things like that, or what is that we're doing that to ensure that we're using the resources we have adequately.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned pension payments, so I'm going to ask this question now. Yes or no, this is a question about whether or not you think the city should go back to picking up the cost of non-teaching pensions, or if you think CPS and the Board of Education should continue to pick up the cost of non-teaching pensions as it has since 2020. And just to clarify, that's the $175 million payment that's kind of caused a lot of conflict between the current mayor, and the school board that's outgoing.
Yeah, I believe that we should go back to the city picking up that payment right now. As I said, education is an investment for the entire city of Chicago. We are ensuring that we have the workforce for tomorrow, that our families are well supported. That's not just the responsibility of the Chicago Public Schools, right? That's a responsibility of all levels of government, nonprofit organizations that are supporting our families. So I believe that that payment should be made by the city of Chicago to be able to support the school system.
Got it. Okay. Moving on to school choice. So yes or no, another yes or no question. Do you believe that any of Chicago Public Schools admissions policies should change?
No.
If no, can you explain why you think the current policies work as they are currently laid out?
Well, I would want to be able to see first what is the policy and how it works currently, and then talk to families about how they feel about those policies. Our families need to have the opportunity to be able to choose where they want to send their children at the elementary school level and the high school level. And I believe that if we're not providing those choices, then families are going to choose to either leave the city of Chicago or choose some other educational system for their family. And so I would want to see what is it that the admissions policies currently are and how they're working by learning from families. But I wouldn't want to change something immediately without first really studying what is that going to look like. So I don't believe that this board in the next year should be able to make that type of change in terms of especially selective and magnet schools.
Because you went to Northside College Prep. Yeah. Do you remember what the admissions policies were like when you enrolled there and that process? Could you tell us a little bit about
I
that?
remember it being a process of grades, test scores, and attendance to be able to get into Northside at the time. And I remember how incredibly excited I was. The reason I chose Northside, so I've lived in North and Kedzie my entire life. That was one bus up, the Kimball bus, all the way up to Northside. And in 8th grade, I had the opportunity to take a biology class at Northeastern Illinois University. So right off the same Catalpa stop and being able to go to Northeastern, and then I got to see Northside pretty much every week. And so that's how I decided that that's where I wanted to go and be at. And so I really want to ensure that families who want those choices for their families, for their children, are able to make those choices.
Another element of choice in this Chicago public school system is the 100+ charter schools that the Chicago Board of Education has approved and opened and continues to allow to operate. Charter schools are publicly funded and privately run. There have been times that the Board of Education in the past has taken steps to end those contracts when charter schools are not performing well or have had financial troubles. This most recently happened with Urban Prep, though there was a legal fight that did ensue. Are you, as a board member, of voting to end charter school agreements, even if it means a school closure?
So first off, I am against any type of school closure. School closures really destabilize our communities. We know that from the history of our city, just 10 years ago, closing 50+ schools. And so I'm completely against school closures. In terms of our charter schools, I am a supporter of charter schools. I'm a supporter of school choice. So that means charter, selective, magnet. I want our families to be able to have those opportunities, to be able to choose where they want to send their children, to choose their best educational option for them. And so accountability is important at every single level. And as the board, we need to be able to hold all of our schools accountable. And so I want to be able to ensure that we're providing adequate resources and support for all of the schools in the district.
Okay. Moving on to equity, and this is something that I'm sure may hit home for District 3. So there are schools in the district that have seen a big influx of migrant students, but also just an uptick in English language learners, students who are identified as learning English as an additional language. But those schools do not have staff that speak the language that the students speak, or they don't have staff that are certified to teach bilingual programs. What, as a board member, would you see as a good short-term solution to these staffing shortages? And what would be a long-term solution to help ensure English learners have what they need to thrive in school?
Yeah, as a former teacher, I have, I started my career at Lowell Elementary in my neighborhood. We had a lot of English language learners then when I started my career back in 2012 at Lowell, and I'm very proud to be able to speak the language and talk to our families and students in their native language and work with them on building those skills. And then when I was working at UIC College Prep, the same thing of being able to provide services and be able to talk to families in their native language is really important to me. One of the things that we can do as a district, and CPS is working on this when we're trying to increase programming to have more high schoolers who are interested in becoming teachers work toward that. There's great programs that exist outside of CPS, like Golden Apple, that are really encouraging more people, especially Chicago high schoolers, to become teachers. I think that the long term, we can look at increasing programs like that. How do we as a school system, we need to be sure that we're providing education and information on all types of careers. Teaching is a career option that I would want our families to think about. I've heard, even while listening to podcasts, I've heard commercials about becoming a teacher in Illinois, which I think is a great opportunity in Spanish, those ads. That's been really great to help other families learn about this as an option. And so there's definitely short-term solutions and long-term solutions. In the short run, obviously, we have this need now. Yeah. We have lots of students that need those supports. How are we increasing programming? Obviously, you want to ensure that you have additional help that we can ensure that we can get into those classrooms, whether that's help in training parents, the parent mentor programs that exist. How are we providing additional opportunities for people to become certified, to be able to support in classrooms?
Another area where there have been a lot of staffing shortages in Chicago Public Schools has been in special education. What policies would you support to recruit more teachers to serve students who have disabilities or special education certifications?
Yeah, I think that we can definitely work toward helping more teachers who are currently in the classroom receive that certification and endorsement, right? Mm-hmm. What are the programs and incentives we're offering them to be able to receive the same thing with bilingual educators? What are the incentives we're providing to them to be able to do that? If you're a teacher, as I was, if you're a teacher and then you're, thinking about, oh, I really want to be able to provide this service and do the support, but I have to pay for it out of pocket, and I'm, don't want to have to spend thousands of dollars on an additional certification if there isn't really more incentives for it. What are the programs that we're providing teachers to help them get those certifications for free or very low cost, with partnerships with universities in the area, other types of partnerships where we can ensure that we're helping teachers get those certifications? Because I'm sure there's a lot more educators who would be interested if they have the ability to receive that at a very low cost or free. Mm-hmm.
Another issue with special education, students with disabilities have had a long struggle with getting transportation to school. This has been worsened by the pandemic and the bus driver shortage that ensued in the years to follow the pandemic. This continues to linger. This year we've heard of students waiting 4 or 5 weeks into the school year for a bus route. These are students with disabilities who need and are legally entitled to services at schools. What, as a board member, would you like to see the board do to solve this problem once and for all and stop starting the school year with, hundreds and almost, in some cases, thousands of kids without bus routes?
So I know CPS released a plan a few board meetings ago around what they wanted to do to be able to support this issue, and I believe they're on track to have all students be able to be bused by the end of the first quarter. That's still not acceptable for kids that need to be in classrooms. And I think that there's lots that we can do as a city to support this issue. We need to increase, obviously, incentives for bus drivers. It's a really hard job, and it's a city full of traffic. And so what are we doing to support bus drivers to get those certifications, to get their CDL license, to be able to get kids to and from school? But also, what are the alternative transportation systems that are out there, whether that's doing paratransit or some other transit modalities that are available to get students to and from school. So I don't necessarily think it needs to be a yellow school bus. There's lots of other transportation systems that are available. So let's think about what those issues can be. And then finally, we need to make sure that we're working with all of our partners in this field. This can't be a solution that's only brought up by the CPS board or by CPS. What are we doing to bring others in to help us with this? So what are the meetings looking like with transportation companies? Are we bringing in families who have these issues to hear their ideas? We have a really strong advocacy group, the CPS Parents for Buses. What are their ideas, and how can we work on implementing some of their ideas to figure out how we can get students students to school. I think it's incredibly important that we don't let these students miss out on their education because of transportation issues.
Is there more work that the board could be doing with other government agencies or other transit authority? I'm thinking, CTA, RTA, PACE, all of these systems. Is there something more that the board could be doing on that front? I know that's not traditionally how students with disabilities get to school, but certainly they may have ideas.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's an opportunity always to be able to be open to dialogue and to hear out ideas. It doesn't necessarily need to be, like I said, the board solving the problem. How are we bringing others in to be able to help us solve that problem? And so thinking about our paratransit system that's run by PACE, like what does that look like? How are we utilizing them to help us get students to school during this critical time? Obviously, resources are limited, but we need to make sure that we're meeting legal requirements to be able to get these students to school. And that's what worries me the most, is that we're not getting these students into seats, into the classroom.
Well, and we know that the state has monitored this in the past, and there's another complaint opened. We'll keep watching that. So let's move on to facilities and infrastructure. So one of the key roles of the board is to also pass a capital plan. The first question I want to ask is about, how the district manages its current enrollment with all of the buildings that it does operate. As you know, the district's seen modest enrollment increases in the last 2 years, but overall the number of students remains dramatically lower than it was a decade ago, and I'm sure when you were in school as well. Some schools serve a fraction of the students they once did. How should the board and the Chicago Public Schools balance its current enrollment realities with the hundreds of buildings it has in its footprint?
Yeah, as I said, clearly.
You mentioned earlier you're not a fan of closing.
We're not here to close schools. And one of the things that I believe schools can do now is work on bringing in community partnerships. One of the things that I've been saying all along when I talk to families is that Chicago doesn't have enough community centers. We don't have enough safe spaces. And the work that I do with nonprofit agencies and my work with COPA, I talk to a lot of these community organizations, and one of the biggest issues that they face when they want to throw events and have safe spaces is a lack of space. And then there are legal requirements, insurance requirements, things like that that prevent sometimes CPS buildings from being utilized for this purpose. But let's figure out a workaround to bring in more community organizations that can help out, community organizations that are going to be in classrooms that are not being utilized. I think when we're working in that sense, we can also think about what are some revenue that we can bring in that's going to be able to support the school. Obviously, I went to Northside Prep. It's a very beautiful building. A portion of the Northside budget comes in from rentals, being able to rent out the theater, or being able to rent out the gym. That helps out, right? So what can we do to ensure that we're helping bring in more revenue to help out with these capital issues? There is a large problem with our capital budget in that we're not providing enough money for the budget. You think about the billions of dollars that are today needs to get fixed. That's not there in the budget. So we need to make sure that we're assessing our buildings and seeing what needs to be fixed today that's a health hazard, to ensure that we're providing safe and adequate space for our families.
On that note, capital planning in the past at CPS has been criticized for not being equitable and lacking a true system of prioritization for which schools will get repairs when, which neighborhoods will get new buildings. It's also quite expensive for CPS to fund school repairs because of the district's junk bond status and borrowing picture. How would you approach capital planning in an equitable manner so that CPS could start actually tackling its, $14 billion of outstanding capital need?
You're right. So one of the things that I've learned in my, so I'm in a fellowship right now called All Chicago Academy for Local Leadership that's just focused on school board, preparing myself for hopefully to serve on the school board. And one of the things that I've learned in this fellowship is that board service is not about just the needs of the kids in my district, but rather the needs of the entire city of Chicago, their entire school system. And so what I want to make sure that we're doing as a board of 21 members, which is huge, is that we need to be able to come to a consensus of like what are the things that we're going to focus on, what are the capital expenses that we're going to work on, and obviously every single member wants to be able to come back and say, I got a new school in my district, right, or I got this major repair. We can't think of it in that sense. We have to be able to think about it. What are the needs equitably across the city of Chicago to ensure that we're helping out every single child in CPS, not just the ones in your district. Obviously, I want to be able to say that I got something for my district, but it's going to be about how can we work together with all 21 members to decide what are the most pressing needs right now that are safety hazards to be able to fix. I think that's going to be most important.
And what about the financial piece of that? Given the district's bond ratings and usually school, some good borrowing, often people will say good borrowing is when you're borrowing money to build new infrastructure, build new buildings. What are your thoughts about how does CPS get the money that it needs to address its capital needs?
I think that's going to be good governance and good budgets, right? What are we doing as a board to ensure that we get out of that junk bond status, to ensure that we can in the future use that borrowing power to build more in the city? So I think that that's one of the key tenets of I don't want to put us in debt forever. I want us to be able to ensure that we have a balanced budget so that we could borrow later in the future to be able to help with these capital expenses, which you said is billions and billions of dollars.
I think it's $14 billion at the last assessment, $3 billion in critical need, and there's a whole education facilities master plan that CPS put out last year. If folks want to go look for that on our site or on CPS's site. We're getting close to the end here, and I wanted to start. I've got two wrap-up questions. One is, I know he's not here today. Your opponent is not here today, but if you weren't running for school board, and there's only two of you, but would you vote for him? Why or why not?
I would want to see who else would be running. Right now, my main concern, and I've known Jason for many, many years. We both did Teach for America here in Chicago, and so I met him actually when I did the core. So I've known him for a really long time. I'm most concerned right now about his tie to the Chicago Teachers Union. You can't have the CTU on both sides of the negotiating table, especially right now that we're going through contract negotiations. I want to make sure that we have someone in the seat that is going to talk about the needs of every single family in the district. I'm really concerned about school choice, selective enrollment and magnet schools in my district. If you look at 3B, and if you look at the District 3 as a whole, our top feeder schools are Pritzker College Prep, a Noble School, and Lane Tech. Those are two out of the 5 top feeder schools in the district. And so I want to make sure that
when you say feeder school, what do you mean? Can you just explain?
Children in the district
go
to those schools most often.
Okay.
And so that's the University of Chicago released that recently when they're dividing data by district. And so I want to make sure that we're providing families that choice and that we're not limiting the ability for families to choose those options.
Got it. And then this one is, again, sort of reflecting on your own time in school. Is there a teacher or staff member from your time in school that you still remember today and shaped your life? Who are they and why?
This is too many to name. I truly believe that I am the person I am today, that I have the career that I have today because of teachers who were there to support me every step of the way. And I want that for every child in the city of Chicago. I want that for every child in my district especially. And the neighborhood feel at Lowell, the love that I received from my teachers there. I mean, if we're like Miss Gray in 6th grade, Miss Wendorf in 7th grade, Miss Knapsick, my math teacher, there were so many folks who just provided me with love and warmth and made me feel safe. That is really what I want for our children. And so there's so many of them. and I don't want to forget anyone because
I
still keep in contact with a lot of these, with a lot of my teachers, and I think that's really beautiful that 25 years later, I'm still in contact with a lot of my teachers. And actually, my former elementary school principal just retired last year. She was one of the first donors to my campaign, and someone who really took care of me when I needed support. I grew up in poverty. My mom immigrated from Mexico, and we didn't have a lot. And at the point in her working career when the factory shut down, she desperately needed a job with health insurance. And she got that job at Lowell. My mom became my lunch lady.
Oh, interesting.
And it's not a highly paid job, and I love our support staff, and I think that they need to get paid more. My mom was making $8,000 a year, but what kept her there was the really amazing health insurance that CPS provides. And so I want to make sure, and obviously she became an integral part of that school community, as every single person who works in a school does.
Yeah, wow. Well, yes, we do shout out to school support staff. They are the unsung heroes of the school system. Carlos, thank you so much for joining us this morning. This has been really, really nice.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
We appreciate you taking the time to be here. And thank you for tuning in to Chalkbeat's inaugural school board candidate forums to learn more about the people running in these historic first school board elections. You can find all our voter guides and additional resources at chalkbeat.org/Chicago. Thank you again to our partners at Block Club Chicago, WBEZ, and the Chicago Sun-Times for helping put together all of those voter guides and resources. Special thanks to Tiana Van Gundy at Fueled Events for planning and hosting these forums, and to BPM Film Company for video and audio production. Thanks to our engagement team at Chalkbeat and to the team of the Chicago Bureau. Our managing editors are Eric Gorski and Carrie Malago. Our editor-in-chief is Sarah Darville. For Chalkbeat Chicago, I'm Becky Vivi. Have a great day and happy voting.